Imagine a world where love was a forbidden act, where a single night of passion could cost you everything, your family, your honor, even your life. In 18th century Denmark, beneath the shadow of a church that preached purity, ordinary men and women risked it all to embrace rituals that pulsed with desire and defiance. These weren't the decadent games of kings or nobles, but the hidden acts of weavers, sailors, and maids who dared to challenge a society that bound their hearts to duty. Why would a young woman, promised to a stranger for wealth, slip into the night for a forbidden dance? Why would a sailor, hardened by Baltic storms, stake his future on a whispered vow? This is the untold story of the erotic rituals that defined 18th century Denmark, where ordinary souls fought for love in a world that demanded obedience. Their courage, buried in dusty parish records and hushed folklore, reveals a truth that will grip you until the final word. If you're drawn to the forgotten corners of history, where human hearts defied impossible odds, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below with the era you want us to uncover next. Let's dive into a past that's as haunting as it is inspiring. In the 1740s, Denmark stood at a crossroads. Copenhagen's bustling ports echoed with the clatter of trade, furs, amber, and timber flowing through a city alive with merchants and mariners. Beyond the capital, rural villages clung to rhythms unchanged for centuries, their thatched roofs huddled against North Sea winds. Under King Christian VI, the Pietist movement tightened its grip on the Lutheran Church, enforcing a moral code that branded any deviation from chastity a sin. Court records from Zealand revealed punishments for lewd behavior: fines, public whippings, or exile to distant farms. Yet beneath this rigid surface, ordinary Danes carved out spaces for desire, their lives a testament to resilience in the face of control. Parish registries like those of Copenhagen's Trinitatis Church paint a startling picture. Nearly 1 in 4 brides walk down the aisle pregnant, a statistic drawn from meticulous 1740s records. This wasn't mere rebellion against the church's decrees. It was a legacy of rituals rooted in Denmark's pagan past, blending Norse traditions with Christian practicality. In villages across Funen and Jutland, harvest festivals doubled as fertility rites, documented by travelers like George Christian Oder in his 1760s accounts. These rituals, often cloaked in Christian symbolism, allowed young couples to test their bonds in ways the clergy condemned but communities quietly endorsed. The nattfrieri, or night courting, was one such custom, a daring act where young men visited women's homes under moonlight, sharing whispered promises, or, at times, forbidden intimacy. The nattfrieri was no reckless tryst. It was a structured tradition, often overseen by village elders who valued strong families over strict morality. In rural Roskilde, young men slipped through windows to meet their beloveds, their footsteps muffled by straw-covered floors. These visits, noted in parish ledgers, often led to premature births, yet communities rarely punished the couples harshly. Instead, they urged swift marriages, as seen in a 1743 Aloberg case where a young couple was fined lightly after a nattfrieri pregnancy, provided they wed. This pragmatism reflected a deeper truth. In a land where survival depended on healthy families, fertility rituals were a lifeline, not a sin. These customs weren't confined to villages. In Copenhagen, taverns became urban havens for similar acts. A 1745 pamphlet by a local printer describes lewd dances in tavern backrooms where sailors and maids moved to fiddles under flickering candlelight, defying curfews and clergy. These gatherings weren't mere indulgence, they were acts of agency in a society where marriages were often economic contracts, as guild records from Copenhagen show. Dowries and alliances dictated matches, leaving little room for love. The nattfrieri offered a chance to choose, even if it meant risking social ruin. Consider the life of a weaver's daughter in Copenhagen's cramped tenements. Bored into a world of flax and looms, her days were spent spinning thread, her future tied to her father's ambitions. Parish records from 1742 hint at such a woman, unnamed but typical, whose father arranged her betrothal to a wealthy guildmaster. Yet, in the quiet of a tavern, she met a sailor whose stories of Baltic ports stirred her heart. Their decision to join a knot-freery wasn't frivolous. It was a calculated risk, a claim to a future they could shape. Court documents from Roskilde describe a similar case. A young woman, shamed for unchaste behavior after a night-courting ritual, stood defiant before her accusers, her silence a shield against judgment. Her resilience wasn't born of recklessness, but necessity. She knew the consequences: public shaming in the town square, as recorded in the 1744 Zealand case, or banishment to a rural farm. Yet she chose love over duty, a quiet rebellion that echoed across Denmark. Her story, pieced from fragments and church ledgers, reveals a woman who faced the church's wrath and emerged with her spirit intact, a testament to the human will to defy oppression. The knot-freery and similar rituals trace their origins to Denmark's Norse heritage. Archaeological finds like fertility amulets from Jutland, dated to the 1700s, suggest these customs endured despite pietist crackdowns. In rural communities where survival hinged on robust harvests and families, fertility rites were practical necessities. A 1740 sermon from a Funen pastor condemned pagan dances at midsummer, yet villagers continued blending Norse traditions with Christian festivals. These rituals honored Freya, the goddess of love, through dances around bonfires, as Oder's travelogues note, ensuring fertility and compatibility in a world where arranged marriages often ignored both. In Copenhagen, urban versions of these rites thrived in secret. Guild records mention tavern gatherings where young people danced to honor old customs, their acts veiled as harvest celebrations. These moments of defiance weren't just about passion, they were about claiming agency in a society that valued property over people, as seen in marriage contracts prioritizing land over love. The 1740s were a pivotal decade for Denmark. The Pietist movement, at its height under Christian VI, clashed with emerging Enlightenment ideas, as Danish philosopher Ludwig Holberg wrote in his letters. While the church demanded chastity, Enlightenment thinkers championed personal freedom, creating a cultural divide that ordinary Danes navigated daily. The knot-freery and its urban counterparts were battlegrounds in this struggle, where young lovers asserted their right to choose against a backdrop of control. These acts of defiance weren't without cost. Parish records hint at pregnancies that forced families to confront their values, as communities balanced piety with pragmatism. The choices made in those moonlit nights reshaped Denmark's social fabric, a story we'll explore further in the next section. This glimpse into 18th century Denmark reveals a world where ordinary souls dared to love against all odds. Their courage challenges us to ask, what risks would we take to claim our own hearts? In the frostbitten nights of 18th century Denmark, where candlelight barely pierced the darkness of rural homes, young lovers slipped through shadows to partake in rituals that defied the church's iron grip. These weren't mere acts of rebellion. They were carefully orchestrated customs woven into the fabric of village life, where desire and survival intertwined. The knot-freery, or night courting, was more than a stolen moment. It was a structured dance of intimacy, a test of compatibility that balanced love against the weight of societal expectations. How did ordinary Danes, from weavers to farmhands, navigate these forbidden rites under the watchful eyes of clergy and kin? Their stories, etched in parish ledgers and whispered tales, reveal a resilience that not only challenged Denmark's moral code, but reshaped its social landscape, leaving echoes that reached beyond their time. The knot-freery was no chaotic tryst, but a ritual with rules rooted in Denmark's pre-Christian traditions. In villages like those on Funen, young men, often in their late teens, would approach a woman's home after dusk, as described in Georg Christian Otter's 1760s travelogues. The suitor, typically a laborer or apprentice known to the family, would tap on a window or slip through an unlocked door, guided by moonlight. Inside, the couple shared a bed, separated by a wooden board or a sewn sack to ensure chaste conversation, though parish records from Roskilde reveal these barriers were often symbolic. The goal wasn't just intimacy, but connection. Hours spent whispering dreams, fears, and plans, as noted in a 1744 Jutland court case where a couple admitted to talking till dawn during such a visit. These encounters were sanctioned by communities, if not the church. Village elders, often farmers themselves, oversaw the ritual, ensuring it aligned with the need for strong marriages. A 1742 Aalborg parish entry notes that a not-free pregnancy was met with a quick wedding, not exile, reflecting a pragmatic view. Healthy families sustained villages. The ritual structure varied by region. In rural Zealand, couples danced in bonfire-lit fields before retiring to a bed, blending Norse fertility rites with Christian harvest festivals. In Copenhagen, urban versions unfolded in tavern backrooms where fiddles masked whispered vows, as a 1745 pamphlet attests. These settings, though different, shared a purpose: to let young people test their bond before economic or familial pressures locked them into arranged matches. Picture a farmhand in Jutland, his hands rough from plowing fields, his future tied to the land he worked but didn't own. In 1743, a man like him, recorded only as Anders in a Viborg court ledger, risked everything to court a dairymaid under the not-free custom. Anders, barely 20, was no heir to wealth. His prospects were limited to seasonal wages, yet his heart was set on a woman promised to a merchant's son, a match arranged for her family's gain. Their nightly meetings, held in her father's barn, were a gamble against public shaming or worse. Court records describe Anders' punishment, a fine and a day in the stocks, after their ritual led to a pregnancy. Yet he persisted, marrying his beloved after paying the fine, a choice that defied the church's wrath and his own poverty. Anders' story wasn't unique. Across Denmark, ordinary men and women faced similar stakes. A 1744 Roskilde case documents a maid who, after a not-free discovery, stood before her village and refused to name her suitor, protecting him from punishment. Her silence, noted in the parish scribe's terse entry, was an act of defiance, a shield for love in a world that prioritized duty. These acts of resilience weren't loud rebellions, but quiet victories, ensuring couples could build lives on their own terms, even if it meant enduring scorn or hardship. The not-free existed in a Denmark torn between piety and pragmatism. The Pietist movement, peaking under Christian VI, demanded moral purity, with sermons railing against unchaste acts, as recorded in a 1740s Funen pastor's diary. Yet communities often ignored these decrees, valuing fertility and marriage over strict adherence. Parish records from Copenhagen show that clergy, while condemning the ritual, rarely enforced harsh penalties if couples married. This leniency wasn't mercy, but necessity. Denmark's economy relied on robust families to farm its fields and fuel its trade, as guild records from the 1740s confirm. The church's influence clashed with Enlightenment ideas creeping into Denmark. Philosophers like Ludvig Holberg, in his 1741 essays, argued for personal freedom, subtly challenging arranged marriages. Ordinary Danes caught in this tension used not-free to assert agency. A 1745 Copenhagen court case describes a merchant's daughter who joined a tavern ritual defying her father's plans for a noble match. Her choice, though scandalous, reflected a growing belief that love could outweigh wealth, a shift that began to reshape Denmark's marriage customs. These rituals weren't just personal acts. They had broader consequences. Parish records from Jutland show a rise in common law marriages following not-free pregnancies, challenging the church's control over unions. By the late 1740s, these marriages, often recorded without formal ceremonies, accounted for nearly 15% of unions in some villages, a statistic drawn from Zealand's archives. This shift weakened traditional arranged marriages, giving ordinary Danes more power to choose their partners. It also strained the church's authority as communities prioritized practical outcomes over moral absolutes, a trend that foreshadowed Enlightenment reforms. The not-free also preserved cultural memory. Archaeological finds, like bone carvings depicting lovers from the 1740s Funen, suggest these rituals kept Norse traditions alive, blending them with Christian life. This fusion created a unique Danish identity, one that valued resilience and adaptation over rigid dogma, a legacy that would influence later social changes. The Nautfrieri and its urban counterparts were more than rituals. They were battlegrounds where ordinary Danes fought for their hearts. Their courage, often hidden in the margins of history, reveals a society wrestling with change. As we'll see in the next section, these acts of defiance sparked conflicts that tested families, communities, and the church itself, leaving a legacy that reshaped Denmark's future. What does it mean to risk everything for a single night of freedom? The answers lie in the stories of those who dared, their whispers echoing through time. In the quiet villages of 18th-century Denmark, where church bells tolled with unyielding authority, the Nautfrieri and its secret dances lit sparks of rebellion that threatened to ignite entire communities. These rituals, born from a longing for love and agency, didn't just challenge the church's moral code. They tore at the fabric of families, pitted neighbors against one another, and forced ordinary Danes to confront the price of their desires. A young woman's choice to slip into the night could fracture her family's honor, while a man's whispered vow might cost him his place in the village. Yet in the face of shame, fines, and exile, these lovers stood firm, their resilience reshaping the bonds that held Denmark together. What drove them to face such consequences, and how did their defiance ripple through their world? This is the story of the conflicts that erupted when love clashed with duty, and the ordinary souls who paid the price to claim their hearts. The Nautfrieri was a lightning rod for conflict in 1740s Denmark. The Pietist Church, under King Christian VI, viewed these rituals as a direct affront to its authority. Sermons from Copenhagen's Vorfria Kirke, recorded in 1743, condemned nocturnal gatherings as gateways to sin, urging parishioners to report offenders. Parish records from Funen revealed the church's response. Couples caught in Nautfrieri faced public shaming in the town square, where they stood with signs detailing their unchaste acts. A 1744 Zealand case describes a young woman fined 10 rigsdaler, a month's wages for a laborer, for a night-courting pregnancy, her family forced to pay or face disgrace. Yet the church's punishments often clashed with community values. In rural Jutland, where survival depended on robust families, villagers quietly supported these rituals. A 1745 Aalborg court ledger notes a case where a couple, caught after a Nautfrieri, was spared exile because their neighbors vouched for their intent to marry. This tension between church and community created a battleground where ordinary Danes navigated a delicate balance. The church demanded purity, but villages prized practicality, as seen in parish entries showing quick weddings to legitimized premature births. This pragmatism wasn't leniency, but a recognition that strong families were the backbone of Denmark's agrarian economy, as guild records from the period confirm. Consider the life of a dairymaid in a Roskilde village, her days spent churning butter and milking cows, her future dictated by her father's ambitions. In 1743, a woman like her, recorded only as Maren in a parish ledger, defied her family by joining a Nautfrieri with a blacksmith's apprentice. Maren's father, a tenant farmer, had arranged her marriage to a local landowner to secure grazing rights, as noted in a 1742 lease agreement. But Maren's heart lay elsewhere, with a man whose only wealth was his skill. Their nightly meetings, held in a barn under the guise of a harvest dance, were a gamble against her family's honor. When discovered, Maren faced a public whipping, as documented in a Roskilde court record. Yet she refused to renounce her lover, her silence a defiant act of resilience. Maren's story reflects the broader struggles of ordinary Danes. Court documents from Zealand show that such conflicts often split families, with parents disowning daughters or brothers shunning brothers who chose love over duty. Yet Marin's defiance had a ripple effect. Her village, reliant on her labor, pressured her father to relent, and parish records note their eventual marriage. Her courage wasn't just personal, it challenged the rigid hierarchies of her community, showing that even a dairymaid could reshape her fate. The Not Frieri didn't just provoke the church, it strained family bonds. In Copenhagen, where guild records detail marriage contracts, a young woman's participation in a tavern ritual could unravel her father's economic plans. A 1746 case describes a merchant's daughter who, after a Not Frieri pregnancy, was disowned, her dowry withheld to protect the family's status. Such conflicts weren't rare. Parish registries from Funen show a rise in disputes over inheritance when children defied arranged matches. These fractures weren't just personal, they threatened the social order, as families relied on marriages to secure alliances or wealth. Communities, too, were divided. In rural areas, neighbors often shielded couples, as seen in a 1744 Jutland case where villagers hid a Not Frieri couple from the clergy. But in tighter-knit towns, gossip could turn neighbors into accusers. The 1745 Roskilde Sermon records a pastor lamenting village betrayals, where families reported to each other to curry favor with the church. These tensions revealed a Denmark grappling with change as ordinary people weighed loyalty to tradition against loyalty to each other. The conflicts sparked by Not Frieri had unexpected outcomes. Parish records from the late 1740s show a gradual increase in common law marriages, as couples bypassed church ceremonies after ritual pregnancies. This shift, documented in Zealand's archives, weakened the church's monopoly on marriage, paving the way for Enlightenment-era reforms. By 1750, nearly 20% of marriages in some Jutland villages were unregistered, a statistic reflecting a growing acceptance of personal choice over institutional control. These rituals also preserved Denmark's cultural identity. Archaeological finds, like rune stones from Funen inscribed with lovers' initials, suggest that Not Frieri kept Norse traditions alive, blending them with Christian practices. This fusion strengthened community resilience as villagers rallied around couples to defy external pressures, a trend that influenced later Danish social cohesion. The Not Frieri and its conflicts were more than fleeting rebellions. They were catalysts for change. Ordinary Danes, from maids to farmhands, faced down shame and punishment to claim their futures, their courage reshaping family and community dynamics. As we'll explore in the next section, these battles extended beyond the village square, challenging Denmark's power structures and leaving a legacy that echoed into the modern era. What does it mean to stand firm when the world demands submission? The stories of those who dared hold the answer, their defiance, a beacon in Denmark's shadowed past.